being able to share with the group. I have a PowerPoint I'm gonna go through. I hate death by PowerPoint, so let's make this interactive and casual. You know, you don't want to just hear me talk for 30 minutes straight. If you have any questions, please feel free to just chime in. You know, I don't usually monitor chat, so just speak out. And let me find my presentation. I'll share this. Let's go from here. All right, so everybody sees my presentation screen? Map of Nevada County? Give me a thumbs up. Yep, okay, great. All right, just so everybody knows where Nevada County is, most of the time when I tell people I'm from Nevada County, they think I'm from a county in Nevada somewhere in the desert, and they don't understand why we have broadband problems. But no, we are in California, just north of Sacramento. So if you look up at the map up here, let me get my pointer going for you guys. We're in Northern California. So if you look, we're about an hour from downtown Sacramento. So I can be at the state capitol parking lot in an hour and 15 minutes from my office in Nevada City. We're about 40 minutes from Reno if you take 80 out. So if you've ever driven up 80 to Lake Tahoe or to Reno, you've driven through Nevada County. We have elevation that comes from about 400 feet. And this is the Sacramento Valley floor. Those are the Sutter Buttes, if you know the area, all the way to over 9,100 feet at the peaks over the Sierra at the summit. And we have a lot of this stuff and this stuff, which is granite. So it's very challenging to do some of the undergrounding projects. We've had a lot of contractors go out of business when they try to build roads and whatnot, if they run into granite, and they didn't properly accommodate for that. We have 3 historical downtowns, and all our towns have mines underneath them and tunnels, and so it can be very challenging. The other thing that we have is we have big trees. We have forests, you know, 200-foot pine and cedar trees that play havoc on wireless communications. And we have pockets of neighborhoods. So we might have a neighborhood over here that has 30 homes, and then you got to drive a half hour or a half mile. And then you have a pocket of neighborhood over here that has 40 homes. Then you drive another quarter mile. And that really plays havoc on line extension policies and capabilities for our incumbent wireline providers, because it just doesn't meet their return on investment for line extension. So we end up, you know, cable plant might come to this point, but it doesn't go any further because we have this half mile, quarter mile of no homes. So that's one of our main challenges in our community. So what are we really focusing on in 2021 and now in 2022 is being ready. You know, the money has been telegraphed out for a long time that it's coming down. So as a community, we're trying to be as ready as possible to be as competitive as possible to get every dollar into our community that we can. And we know a lot of money is earmarked for our county. You know, the $1 billion in rural last mile, the $1 billion in urban last mile that's allocated from the state out to our counties. We're going to get almost 75 million of that. So we're the second highest allocated rural county in California, behind El Dorado County, which is the highest award. And we're the third highest out of all awards. I think it goes Orange County or LA County, then El Dorado, then us, as far as total money. So it's really exciting that we can have that, but that also speaks to the magnitude of our challenge right now, that it just costs too much. And you guys see this in your counties as well. It costs a lot of money to implement infrastructure in our topologies You know, we have ravines and rivers and canyons and mountains and granite, and it just doesn't have the economy of scale. So without this public subsidy, we just haven't had the infrastructure built out. So we're really excited that that's coming here. So we created a strategic plan, broadband plan, working with our partners here at Business Council, which is also our economic development partner. So we contract with them as a county for our overall economic development strategy and that program. And then we specifically also partner and contract with them on our broadband initiative. So they're part of our broadband team. And Sierra Business Council also operates our regional broadband consortium, the Gold Country Broadband Consortium, working with CETF. So we're very fortunate. Their headquarters are in Truckee, one of our towns, and they actually have staff that live on the western side of the slope here in Nevada City and Grass Valley. So great partners. We wrote a strategic plan in 2019 with them, and we're updating that. We're working on a programmatic EIR, environmental impact report for broadband countywide, and I have a couple slides on that a bit later. And we're doing these other things. I won't go through every one of them, but our main goal, our high level goal, is how do we make our county as attractive as possible to broadband companies to build infrastructure and do projects? How do we make them say, we want to go to Nevada County? We'll get to those other counties eventually, but we want to do the first projects in Nevada County because they're prepared, they're ready, they're supporting us, they've looked at their permits and project approval processes. We know they're going to be good partners. So that's everything that we're trying to work on as a county and as a community. This is some of the highlights from our 2019 strategic plan, connect everyone, partner and collaborate. And we're updating this. Things have changed. When we originally wrote this in 2019, we really weren't looking at open access and how does that play into this. The major funding wasn't really articulated yet from the federal government and the state government. So there's a few things that we're tweaking, but pretty much the same initial push for digital inclusion. We just finished a countywide survey. We called it our Need for Speed Broadband Survey. We did this in-house with our GIS staff. And we surveyed and did a big media. We were hoping to get 3,000 responses. Our county population is roughly 100,000 people. We ended up with 4.2 thousand responses, so we're really happy with this. And as we look at this map, it tells us a few things. A lot of it's not surprising. So if you look at the gray, that's less than 10 megabits per second where the service is. So I can tell where our fiber projects are. Black is meaning they have 100 megabit service. And we have all these holes of kind of gray where we know that's our high need areas. And then we also have red, and red is everywhere. And red is people saying that they can't get service at all. And it's just almost uniformly throughout our Western County area where people say they can't get service. And that goes back to our topology, where we'll have people that can get great service, either a wireline or a fixed service, but their next door neighbor can't. And it's the way the infrastructure is run. It's coming back, maybe it's hitting the house from the backside of a ravine, but they can't make it over to the other house and the provider won't extend it. Or there's a big tree in the way, or it's a hill, or, sometimes we see these little blocks way out in the distance, and maybe that's the top of a hill where a fixed wireless provider can pick up 20 homes, but they can't get anybody around them. And that's really what we've been struggling with over the years. One of the, so you can really see the majority of our county is less than 10 megabits per second, and we have a few, a number of people who are at the 100 megabits. And I would imagine this is all from a recent fiber to the home project that we had completed in the last couple of years in one particular area of the county, kind of way over here. All right, so talking about our EIR, why do we really want to do this? And it's all the basic reasons why you want to do any kind of programmatic EIR. And programmatic means it's covering the whole county. It's being done by the jurisdiction. If a provider were to come in and do a specific project, they would have to do their own environmental impact report just for that project. What we're trying to do is a blanket one, and I'll show the area that covers everywhere we want broadband deployed as a jurisdiction. So all of this background environmental work is put in place. It outlines our sensitive areas, and more importantly, the mitigation methods that the county wants providers to implement when they hit a sensitive area. If they find an artifact, we have many historical areas from our mining heritage and many cultural artifacts from our Native American heritage in our area, which was very prolific. So, and we have sensitive species of vegetation, shrubs, trees, bushes, as well as animal species as well. So all of that gets pre-worked, identified, and then the mitigation methods that the county wants to see. So, really the goal is to lower that bar so projects can happen as fast as possible, and also lower the bar so that local companies that may not have the sophistication of a very large corporation to be able to do their environmental impact reports and studies can get through the project approval process as easily and as hassle-free as possible. Because we know when we talk to our local providers, this is a big hurdle for them. And even if some of the CASF grant projects, they come with CEQA exemptions, that doesn't mean they don't have to do any environmental work. They still have to have an environmental report of how they're going to address the mitigations in the local jurisdiction. For example, our last fiber to the home project, there was only about 2,500 homes. The provider still had to spend about $150,000 on an environmental impact report for that project, even though they had a CEQA exemption. So the whole point, what we're trying to do with this is get these projects so they can get a negative declaration from our planning department and get going to do the construction project, addressing the environmental issues as effectively as we can. We know that's the responsible thing to do, but lowering that bar. The other big piece on this that we really wanted to put this in the early pipeline is if you think about all the infrastructure money that's coming from the federal government and the state government, all those projects have to have some kind of environmental impact report done on them. They have an environmental assessment component to them, from bridges to roads to vegetation projects for wildfire to broadband projects. And there's so much money coming down, and there's only a fixed capacity in these environmental companies in California. So we really saw that if we don't get this in place, even though the money is going to come available, we're going to have a bottleneck with getting this kind of environmental work done, because the companies are just going to be overloaded. They only have so much capacity. So we don't want to have to wait 3 years to get some projects going, because that's the pipeline of environmental consultants out there. And how fast can that industry really expand to this need? Especially if like Build Back Better gets passed in some kind of form, but just with the infrastructure, federal infrastructure bill and what the state is doing, it's still going to stress this industry. So we wanted to get ahead of that curve. We see supply shortages in conduit, and the electronics and fiber for sure. And the last thing we want to do is solve for those problems and not be able to do a project because you can't get a consultant on board for a year. And this is the area. I see some things coming in the chat. So if anybody has, I'm not watching chat. So if anybody has a question, just chime in, please.
For on the programmatic EIR, when I read through the CEQA guidelines, it's like there's a handful of exemptions related to utilities. And that makes me think that the EIR is not necessary. However, you did note that, yes, you do eventually go through some sensitive areas. But if you're within, say, existing county right-of-way or Caltrans right-of-way, and it's a utility project, would the EIR still be necessary?
A formal EIR wouldn't be necessary from the project. This is my understanding from talking to our planning director, from our project applicant, from the utility, but they still have to have, they still have to talk about how they're going to mitigate certain issues. They're going to go across a stream, they're going to go across a wetland. How are they going to deal with that? And having this in place provides all of that framework for them. And also, more importantly, when we talk to, and we partnered on this with California Emerging Technology Fund with Sunny, and one of the other main points was if a project is being appealed, if there's a public appeal, if there's a lawsuit, this protects the Board of Supervisors and helps mitigate that risk from that perspective.
Yeah, I get that. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is the area, if we look at what we want to do for our project area for the EIR, we're doing all of this Western County area, and these are just some of our current providers. So all of the area to the west, south of this red line, and then we're coming up around the Donner Summit Peak, and then the town of Truckee going east of our area. Everything in between here, this is mostly Tahoe National Forest. It's very high country. We don't really have a lot of residents. There might be a few cabins in here, so we're not going to deal with this central area. So we're just dealing where most of our residents in the more densely populated areas. So again, we want to expedite shovel-ready projects. We would be proper stewards of our environmental assets and cultural and heritage assets. And we are looking at our timeline slipped a little bit. We're hoping by the end of the year, we'll have our EIR completed. So we're right in the middle of the project, and we're using Ascent Environmental, which is a company that's done broadband project study in our county before.
Can you share what your budget was for the consultant?
It's about $250,000.
Thanks.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about another reason why we did this. And this is, as we looked and we worked with our incumbent cable providers, which are really the larger telcos in our areas, and we try to work with AT&T and Verizon, and looking at, are they going to meet the need in our community? Again, I talk about those pockets of neighborhoods that we have, and we really don't see them. They haven't told us, that they're going to address those pockets. So we really thought we're going to have to grow our own and really work with local companies. And we started a last mile broadband grant program. And this was funded with economic development money, general fund money, actually from TOD, to do some kind of catalyst, facilitate local companies to get into the business to do this. And this is one of the local companies that started, Nevada County Fiber. And they started with a grant. We gave them a very modest grant of probably $150,000 to hook up 15 homes up in an area that has no broadband whatsoever. And they were able to work with AT&T for their fee. AT&T had fiber up there, but AT&T doesn't want to build out any last mile connections up there. This gentleman started a company, started undergrounding fiber, connecting neighbors, and working with the county. And because he got that county grant and working with Sierra Business Council and the consortium hat, they were able to apply for a CASF grant. They just got it. The award actually went up to about $820,000 to connect another 120 homes in the general area. So it's a real success story of the county really being able to be a catalyst, which actually created a company, was able to leverage our little modest $150,000 to almost $1 million project of connecting fiber connected homes now in an area that would otherwise never have broadband. So excited about that. And this is the type of company where that environmental work is kind of a high bar, to the point where they're laying their conduit and their fiber on private property just to try to get away from having to do that kind of environmental work. So it's an interesting concept.
I have a question if I could.
Yeah.
You work for the county, right? Is Nevada City an incorporated city?
Nevada City is an incorporated city. This is called Nevada County Fiber, but this is an independent company, sole proprietor. So.
But does your work also include the incorporated cities? No.
We advocate for the incorporated cities because they're pretty small. Our incorporated cities all have incumbent cable providers, so they have some level of service. You know, you can get gigabit Comcast service in downtown Grass Valley, downtown Nevada City. So they're not as in dire need. When we look at our county, 65% of the population, probably almost 70% of the population of our county lives in unincorporated county.
And does the EIR or the Program Act EIR cover the cities?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Thank you.
This is another local startup. Again, started up. They applied for one of our last mile grants. They applied to be a 501c3 nonprofit utility, and they actually are probably the first one in California. He claims to be the smallest utility in California. And they're doing some really cool stuff. They went into a neighborhood that had abandoned AT&T fiber, where AT&T actually put in, not the fiber, but the conduit. But AT&T never built it out. It was in a planned community of about 30 homes. And they took over that conduit and are putting fiber into it. It's a nonprofit, which is a really cool model, you know, open access technology. I'm drawing a blank on the company's technology, but it's all open access. They're looking at bundled construction loans with the neighbors. They found a funding source for that, a bank they're working with, where people, you know, if it costs, you know, $8,000 to get the fiber to someone's home, they can actually bundle that construction loan and do with multiple neighbors and do a bigger project to get into the neighborhood. So it's really creative. And it's really, you know, neighborhoods trying to solve their neighborhood problems. And these are areas where, you know, the incumbents just won't go to because of that, you know, what I talked about before. It just doesn't meet their return on investment business models to do that extension and build out. Again, interesting. AT&T doesn't want to build out in this area, but AT&T is providing the backhaul middle mile for this project as well. They have fiber there, but they just won't build out the last mile. So they've worked as a good business partner to these two companies to provide that middle mile service. One of the things that we're looking at right now, and I've talked to our incumbent cable providers, you know, about how do we solve for that line extension? I've talked about that a couple times. That's a real barrier. And what if we could do some kind of grant program where we're splitting that cost? County's throwing in some grant money, the residents are pulling in some grant money, and the ISP is sharing in that equally as well, so that we can bring that barrier down and we can get that line extension. Because I can't tell you how many emails I get every month, and our board supervisor members get every month, where it's a resident saying, myself and 10 of my local neighbors all want service from provider X, and we can see the fiber on the pole 500 feet away, and they want to charge us 20 grand to bring it down, or 50 grand to bring it in, and nobody can afford that. You know, maybe we're one of the highest retiree communities, greatest communities in the state, a lot of citizens on fixed incomes. And, you know, that's a high burden for them. So how can we kind of lower that and solve a problem working with the provider, with the residents, and with some modest county investment? So this one, we've been working on this for probably 2 years. Once you start peeling back the onions, it gets more, that layers of the onion, it gets more and more complicated, but we think we have a path forward on this. The other big strategy, of course, for us is looking at all of the federal money, what's going on out there. We're very active with RCRC, which all of your counties are members of too, working with the Golden State Connect Authority and that JPA, and how can we leverage that asset if we need to try to get something impactful. One of my main concerns is we're going to have $75 million come into our community. It can get chewed up in very high connection rate projects if it's piecemealed all over the place. So how does the county leverage our influence and partner with local providers to get the most impact, the most connections, the best connections in our community for this once in a generation opportunity of this funding? I don't want to get it so dispersed out that we have less impact. So that's a real strategy decision that we're struggling with how do we maximize the use of this money so the most citizens can get served. So this is stuff that I've always talked about when I talk to groups like you guys. What do you need to do? And it sounds like you guys are really quite a ways along. Maria shared the hub and spoke model, which looked really fantastic, of what you guys have in place. But from a county perspective, the best thing we ever did was create a county broadband team. And it's a cross-discipline broadband team. We have the planning director on there. We have the community development director. We have the assistant county executive officer. We have analysts, budget analysts from the CEO's office. We have analysts from the Board of Supervisors office, and of course myself. And our Sierra Business Council team members are on that as well. And we meet regularly. We lay out our plan. We lay out how we're going to work on everything. And it brings everybody to the table. And it really takes that multidisciplinary team to work on this. For the previous 18 years, it was really just myself working on this, trying to promote and work with our regional consortium. But now that there's real money in the pipeline, it takes a more focused, concerted effort. So that would be my number one recommendation. Second, you have to have a plan. You have to know what you want to go after. There's a lot of different ways. There's no one size fits all. We really think it's going to take a patchwork strategy. We really want to work with the incumbents to expand their footprints. We want to work with new providers to do impactful, meaningful projects. And we know we're going to have to work with these little, I hate to call them boutique providers that are going to solve neighborhood problems because nobody else is going to go out to some of our neighborhoods. Second is, make your county as attractive as possible. How do you get people to pick your county over the next county over? We talk to providers. Every community is trying to court every major provider to do a project in their community. What's going to make them pick you? And then stay involved. And then these are the big ones that we're looking at. So the local agency technical assistant program. So we're going to put in our 500K application for that next month when that comes out, or later this month, whenever they publish the package on that. You know, and that's really getting shovel ready to apply for what's allocated to our county, 75 million in the FFA program. And then we've looked at the middle mile. We gave our input. It's a little frustrating not knowing where they're, you know, they kind of published the initial areas where they're going to expand some of the middle mile across the state. We have needs. We might have to tap into the FFA to really get our middle mile where we want it to go. We're fortunate that we have a middle mile in our county that was ARA era funded. So we have a robust middle mile, but we need to do some expansion on that. And then looking at the loan loss reserve fund, if we end up actually doing some kind of municipal project or working with Golden State Connect Authority on how we're going to pay for the project that's not going to come from the FFA money. You know, you got to bond the rest of it. And that's it. So I'm happy. Let me stop sharing this.
Can I ask two questions, or they're related, but you can stop sharing too. But you had the two small businesses that popped up. One, it seems like they're a contractor that lays fiber. And is it the county contracting with them to lay the fiber? And then who owns the fiber at the end of the day? Or is that?
Yeah, multiple angles on that. So the county is not in the broadband business. So we have nothing to do with it. Nevada County Fiber is a private company. So that individual started a company. He bought boring equipment and trenching equipment, and he's doing all of that himself. And as a private company, he owns that infrastructure. How he does that across private property and has that agreement with those private property owners, I'm not sure. But it brings up a great point of all this money is coming, all this public money is coming into your community. Should it stay a public asset? It's a great discussion to have. You know, should it stay a public benefit, or does it become a line item on a private corporation's line sheet? So.
Yeah, I think that relates to the other one. The other small business, then it seems they build out the last mile, and then they're the ISP. So do they ultimately then pay royalties or access fees to AT&T or Verizon or somebody to get in?
Yeah, they don't pay royalties to AT&T, but they do buy their wholesale capacity from AT&T. I mean, they've done relationships with AT&T to buy that middle mile feed from them. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Steve. We do have Chris Moore jumped in and was able to join us. Welcome, Chris, from the CPUC. And we can have plenty of time to ask more questions of Steve, but Chris is here to share a little bit of information on final mile. I'm sorry, technical assistance grants, and I'm going to drop a registration link into chat for an upcoming June 1st webinar. So, Chris.
Okay, thanks a lot, Maria. Yeah, so just quickly, we've got there appears to be a lot of interest in these technical assistance grants. We've got it's gonna be about $50 million that we're going to be having coming out, and this is going to be part of, you know, we've got quite a bit of money overall coming in for last mile over, you know, with applications coming available in the next, you know, through the next 6 months. A lot of this is being finalized right now. I think that probably the best information that you're going to get on this is this link And that, yeah, thanks for dropping that, Maria. That's the registration link. We're gonna have a webinar coming up on June 1st in the morning, 10 a.m. with Rob Osborne, who's our communications division director. We can handle a lot because we're talking almost $3 billion of funding with the combination of state and federal funds. So it sounds like there's already a decent amount of awareness already. I had a question from Paso Robles a couple weeks ago, which I helped field regarding whether technical assistance grants can pay for strategic planning. The answer is yes, but in general, we're more on the nuts and bolts side of things. So to the extent that you can we're really trying to get projects in the ground. If it is a strategic plan, but it's really focused on getting projects in the ground is going to be more successful. We expect these grants to be to be quite a lot of interest and competition for these grants. Maybe we'll be able to get more money from the state if things go quickly, but they're going to be quite competitive. In terms of actual deadlines, it doesn't look like anything has quite been set yet. I think we're looking at, let me just check real quick to make sure I'm correct on this. Yeah, it looks like, sorry. Currently, we're looking at like June, July for the local agency technical assistance grants for a deadline, but that has not been finalized yet.
Quick question, Chris. So with the work in Santa Barbara County and sort of getting everybody ready to look at projects, how much of a strategic plan would need to be completed if we were already able to potentially call out projects? Do you think that we would be able to apply for those technical assistance grants to be applied to projects?
If the projects have already been, sorry,
if the projects have already been like we're working through the strategic planning process so that we can line up those projects. Do we have to have the plan completed to call out projects, or if we're far enough along in the process, we already know where we can call out projects?
I'm hesitant to answer on that. I'm sorry, I'm not fully. I think that's gonna be better. And I know there's a lot of like, especially since we're looking at June 1st, we're gonna have we're gonna have applications opening pretty soon. The webinar isn't until June 1st. I think the best thing is that I relay that. Communications division is fairly responsive on that. Okay. I can get that from them right now. But okay. I mean, I'm not communications division, so okay. I
Fair enough. Thank you, though.
And even on their side, I've heard multiple things. Like they're still working a lot of the stuff out, so it's better that I go ahead and field that with them.
Yeah, if I could just explain a little bit of what we hoped, or what it's looking like we'll try and do in Santa Barbara County is, so the eligible applicants for the technical assistance are all the cities in the county. Yeah, we're a regional agency and kind of filling the same roles what Steve's doing in Nevada County. So it's our hope that we can encourage our cities and the county to apply, and with that, if whatever they're awarded, to pass it through to SBCAG so we could stand up a division to implement a strategic plan and recruit Steve to Santa Barbara where the biking's better.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like that's probably, I mean, what I've got right here is that funding can be used for public entity or consultant costs. This is to create a joint powers authority.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
it can be, my understanding, it can be planning, it can be environmental, it could be strategic plan, it can be engineering of a project, it could be hiring staff, if you need a broadband position, an analyst.
What we found so far is we have 8 cities in the county government, and there's varying levels of the capabilities within these jurisdictions, and most of them have none or very limited. And I think the conversations thus far have said, well, let's centralize it. SBCAG touches the entire region already, and see if we can make some progress through SBCAG.
Right. This is your specifically the eligibility, and you're looking at having them apply.
Unless if the MPO was an eligible applicant, we could
save a step in the process and save 9 subrecipient agreements and MOU.
We'll figure it out. We're gonna get
We'll
there.
figure it out. No, that's been a common thing that's been there before. Is that I know that I've heard similar things from San Diego, is that they were explicitly not allowed to apply before, and that was an issue.
It's an evolving process, and we recognize that it's a lot of money and a lot of moving parts, but you know, we're still foraging ahead. So again, we're working to get prepared and identify,
Right.
you know, how those funds can be applied and what work we're going to be able to apply for as soon as possible.
Yeah,
'Cause a
we
lot of-
have several cities that are pretty small, that just straight up don't have the capacity to do anything related to broadband.
Yeah, probably close to half the county. Like half the cities in the county don't have the capacity or the resources, and
Chris-
making sure they don't get left behind.
Chris, you said that it was 50 million have been set aside for the LATA grants.
Mhm.
We may want to come up with a strategy just to inform everybody from a consortium standpoint what we're doing, because if you take 50 million and you take 500,000 per, that only allows for 100 grants, and yet there's 58 counties in the state. And so I think, you know, Steve, this goes to our statewide consortia discussion, you know, that we were having all the time. It needs to be kind of where we're looking out for everybody, you know, in an equal fashion. And so if there's only 100 grants and we have 58 counties, we need to figure out how to either plus up the pot, or we're going to have to figure out how to distribute, you know, equitably across the state in all these areas. So yeah, I think it's an important statewide conversation to have right now.
Yeah. Because half that money is going to go to LA.
There's 450 cities too, so yeah.
Yeah, so we were excited about these particular grants, and we were, you know, and I didn't realize there was a cap on the pot though, and so it's important that we, you know, recognize that if there's some advocacy required to maybe increase the ceiling, or you know alter the way in which they're going to be selected, so everybody gets a portion of it, you know, that whatever the capacity building resources are going to be really vital at pulling this off.
Well, everybody sign up, and then you'll see communications again coming out from the consortium encouraging registration for that June 1. Also, we have sent out a couple, well, we've sent out one, there's a couple surveys going around as we try to identify needs and assessments. There's a CDT one, there's going to be one from CPUC, and the consortia is also going to be sending one out, or Bill and I will be working with the Santa Barbara cities identifying some of those assets and needs and policy alignment questions. So we'll be continue to push forward on that. Thank you, Chris. Really appreciate you jumping in. Does anybody, please feel free to unmute yourself and ask, does anyone have a question for either Steve or Chris on anything that we've brought up so far today?
Tracy, I like the tagline, need for speed. I really like that. And could I just see your survey, just out of curiosity? I really liked what you were saying.
Yeah, if you go out to our website,
Okay,
and let me,
I can do it offline too, but
yeah, go out to nevadacountyca.gov
okay.
and throw broadband in the search spot, and you can actually take the survey right there, so you can see the whole form. It's still online. We've kind of closed the formal PR push to get survey responses, but we've left the survey open.
Nice job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Laura.
Hi, thanks so much for the presentation to both our presenters and to Bill and Maria for organizing all this today. I had 2 questions for Steve. First, you had mentioned setting up your broadband strategy team within the county and with your economic development organization, and how that was a change from when you were kind of just a one-man show for 18 years. And so I just didn't know if you had If you could share either offline or maybe briefly here on the call, if we have time, just a little bit more about how you structured that team and kind of were you on point for that, or a little bit more on the governance for that model?
Yeah, I'm the chair of the committee, but it's staffed by analysts from the CEO's office and the board of supervisors. They each have our classification is an admin analyst, but you know,
Yeah.
they're really pretty high-end analytical folks that help keep it moving and do the agenda and stuff. But the key piece about it was, you know, the CEO sponsors it, which is key. We have our fiscal analysts on there, economic development, public works director, the planning director, because you can't do broadband without those two people. And having them engaged is really important. So.
Okay, that's helpful. And I had a second question too. You mentioned those two last mile providers. Did they just kind of pop up of their own accord, or was that something that you or your economic development organization kind of had a more active role in encouraging to develop or attracting those folks to the area, those kind of boutique ones you mentioned?
You know, they were both people who've been in the community for 20 years plus. One is a retired Hewlett Packard executive who was working on broadband through another company, and the project never worked out. And then the other one owns a local technology company, service provider company, who's been working on broadband in our community for a long time. And when we started our last mile grant programs, that was the catalyst for them to do something.
Okay, so you had the program that kind of encouraged them
To do something, yeah.
Imagine you have quite a few retirees from the Bay Area. And
Yeah, most of our community is that way. And they weren't the only recipients. You know, we had other incumbent providers, fixed wireless providers that got some grants to do some neat project as well. But those are the two ones that really excite me, because we created two new fiber companies in our community that are servicing areas that would otherwise not be served.
Yeah, and that nonprofit structure you mentioned is also really interesting. I don't know how unique that is, but it's the first type of model I've heard about that.
Steve, one of the themes that we've been really working and pushing very hard is the role of the municipal participation. It kind of shifted through COVID, and where municipalities weren't so much involved, now they're going to be into asset ownership, perhaps, you know, oversight and access of 100% of the community, all those things. And so just briefing municipal partners of that new role and responsibility in building capacity through these grants, I mean, it is a real focus for us. How are you doing with your cities up there? Is that also something new and different in terms of your relationship as a county to the municipalities within your jurisdiction? Are you making progress with that? Is everybody accepting it and understanding it? Is there any breakthroughs that you can share?
I think so. One of the main breakthroughs for us was about 4 or 5 years ago. We had a new board member come on our board of supervisors who was a real broadband enthusiast. And we had broadband, let me back up. Every year our board of supervisors goes through a strategic planning process and workshop where they outline their top 8, they call them objectives, like county staff, you're going to work on these 8 objectives. And they're all the typical economic development, housing, wildfire, public safety, et cetera, that you would see in any county. But broadband was a line item inside of economic development. And they pulled that out 3 years ago to be its standalone objective. So out of the top 8 things the county is supposed to do for the community, broadband is now one of them. So that really elevated it, and that really gave us the catalyst to get our broadband team created and get all the other departments to lean into it. So that was one of the key things. Working with the cities, town of Truckee actually has their assistant town manager is on our broadband team. So they participate very closely. We only have 3 incorporated cities. We have a lot of kind of township things that aren't incorporated, but 3 incorporated cities. Nevada City and Grass Valley don't lean in so much, but it's because their whole city limits are covered with Comcast in a cable franchise. So they don't feel the pain as much as the county and Truckee does.
We've
Hope
been
that answers
encouraged.
your question. Yeah.
We've been encouraging that even at a city level to prioritize broadband at all our conversations, is not just at a county level, but pull out broadband, and maybe it doesn't even get designated potential funding, but stays as a separate item in the conversation, because it's going to start at every level of county. Cities need to have those conversations as well, figure out how to institutionalize it within a separate item.
And broadband crosses so many different areas, telehealth, education, et cetera. But for us, and I'm sure it's for your counties too, it's emergency communications. So it's wildfire. You know, we have wildfires every year. And one of my other hats is I'm the county emergency services director, and it's a big issue. You know, we lose power from a public safety power shutoff or from a wildfire, and people's phones don't work anymore, and cell towers go offline. So how do you do emergency communications? How do we make this broadband infrastructure more resilient? And that's a big issue that we have in our community.
Yeah, I don't know what it is for Santa Barbara County, but I know a little over a year ago, when we were talking with SLO County, we estimated maybe 2 weeks max capacity emergency ability to communicate. Like that's, you know, based on diesel generation, like they could maybe keep their emergency communications open for, 2 weeks. But because just for the need for redundancy within the OES system, and maybe
Yeah.
that's changed, but.
And I'm surprised it's that long, because most of the incumbent providers, you know, the new state regulation is 72 hours. You know, they have to keep their towers and infrastructure that provides phone service operational for 72 hours, but they have exemptions to it. So like Comcast, you know, when I talk to my Comcast folks, they're like, well, Steve, that'd be 250 generators for your community, and that'd be more of a risk than the wildfire, you know. So it's just not going to happen. So, you know, Comcast goes down in about 8 hours if we have a power outage. And a lot of people have their phone on that, so it's a big issue.
I'm aware of time. We are at the full hour, and we will be hosting more of these types of conversations, because they're so helpful. Steve, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and information. I will share the PDF presentation with everyone participating today. And again, just thank you for your time. Thank you for everyone attending. Thank you, Chris. Always appreciate your participation, and we will continue to keep in touch across our Tri-County region, and hope everybody has a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.